So the year is 2006, and in July, federal investigators launch a sex trafficking investigation into Epstein, focused around his Palm Beach property and the police work of Joseph Carroll. 1 month later, in August, Jeffrey Epstein invests $57 million into Bear Stearns' high-grade structured credit strategies enhanced leverage hedge fund. Yes, that is a mouthful. Ian, you might ask, what is a high-grade structured credit strategies enhanced leverage hedge fund?
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
It's so sick we can't talk about it.
The simple answer is it's a giant pile of mortgage-backed CDOs. The toxic trash that in about 2 years is going to cause the entire global financial system to collapse in 2008. If you want to understand it better, watch The Big Short. But this hedge fund isn't just a way to invest in mortgage-backed CDOs. Keyword being enhanced leverage, because the fund is leveraged 17-1. Now, we don't know why Epstein did this. We don't know exactly how much he knew about the state of the markets or the Bear Stearns balance sheets. We don't know if he had any inside baseball on the CDO markets or the ticking time bomb that they represented, at least mostly. But what we do know is that in 2007, coincidentally, as Jeffrey Epstein is negotiating his sweetheart plea deal with the state of Florida, he requested redemption of his entire $57 million investment. Now, $57 million times 17-1 leverage equals $969 million. So this was like pulling $1 billion out of the global CDO market overnight in 2007. Now, maybe this is just coincidental timing. Maybe Jeffrey just needed money to cover his legal fees or was worried that he wouldn't be able to pull out of this risky investment once he went to prison, despite the fact that he was given work release privileges and allowed to walk free for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. But aside from that, maybe he just wanted his money back. But on the other hand, Epstein had worked at Bear Stearns back in the 80s. He was longtime close friends with much of its top management, like Jimmy Kane and Ace Greenberg. And he had been a high-profile client of the bank for nearly 30 years. Simultaneously, as we have learned today, he was an extremely high-profile and protected client of JP Morgan, who would eventually go on to buy Bear Stearns for pennies on the dollar using a bunch of taxpayer bailout money. And so Epstein's positioning right smack in the middle of these two linchpins of the precipitating collapse, Bear Stearns and JP Morgan, is awfully coincidental. Epstein requested redemption of his $57 million in April of 2007. And by June, the Bear Stearns hedge fund was collapsing. It seems likely that Epstein's withdrawal played a significant role in making the firm insolvent. But it's also very likely that the writing was on the wall. Whether Epstein could read it or not, or if he just got lucky, is like, it's probably just a coincidence, right? Well, as it turns out, Epstein was particularly qualified to read the writing on the wall because he was the chair of a little Bermuda-based business venture called Liquid Funding Limited, which was 40% owned by none other than Bear Stearns. Kind of weird. Liquid Funding Limited was essentially a CDO factory. It was another of these funds leveraged to the absolute tits on mortgage-backed securities that formed the bubble that was 2008. According to filings, Liquid Funding could issue up to $20 billion in instruments, meaning it could sell $20 billion worth of like made up financial products of these packaged mortgages and stuff. But the company was only backed up by about $100 million of actual equity. $20 billion of products, 20 billion with the B, backed up by $100 million with an M of actual equity. And Jeffrey Epstein was the chair of this secret little firm. He was overseeing and managing a CDO farm that was largely owned by Bear Stearns. So actually, there would have been few people in the world better positioned than Epstein to have foreknowledge of both Bear Stearns' troubles and the impending financial collapse because of CDOs. And then, conveniently, he resigned as chairman of Liquid Funding on March 19th of 2007, just weeks before his April withdrawal of $57 million from the other hedge fund with the really long name. And then, boom. By the time the dust settled after the bailouts and Bear Stearns had been gobbled up by JP Morgan, liquid funding had just disappeared into the smoke. It apparently was made whole during the bailout process and wound down quietly in the background and ceased to exist. JP Morgan made out like bandits. In January 2007, Bear Stearns had been trading for $172 a share. JP Morgan acquired them in 2008 for $10 per share. And they didn't even have to pay for it all themselves because the Federal Reserve gave them $30 billion of our money to help out. This amounted to JP Morgan acquiring $707 billion of assets in Bear Stearns for a total cost of approximately $9 billion, which is over a 98% discount. Granted that $707 billion was the book value, not the actual market value at the time of the collapse, but you get the idea. JP Morgan became the biggest bank in America after also acquiring Washington Mutual, and they were the only major bank in America to post a net positive quarter in Q4 of 2008. Jeffrey served his sweetheart deal and went on to spend many more years as JP Morgan's most important private client. And everyone lived happily ever after. Just kidding, because we're talking about the world's most notorious child sex trafficker that raped hundreds of girls using the financial networks facilitated by JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank under the protection of our government institutions, now being covered up by the literal president of the United States of America. To this day, none of the bankers who were complicit in Epstein's operations have been charged with a crime. None have done prison time for their role in facilitating his trafficking network, despite being integral to its success. Because the world works for them. It's a banker's world. You're just here to pay the interest.
That would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
That's all for our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please, if you learned something today, hit the subscribe button, like the video, and share it with all of your normie friends. I'm going to be traveling for most of September, so videos will kind of just drop when they drop. And then as we move into the fall, we are going to get down to business. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do that is to go to canceliancarroll.com and buy some merch. For now, drink your water, touch some grass, and do something nice for someone, and we'll see you next time.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sacred we can't talk about it.
Our security is at stake.